Story 1. When I realized I made a mistake, I was not afraid to talk about it. I felt a little anxious, but explaining what I did wrong did not change anything. He worked with me through it as if it was nothing. Story 2. When I did not have that anxiety you get in relationships, the thought of where they are, what they are doing, whether they will message me or if I have to message them first. There were no games. It was all consistent. Even after an argument, I knew I would wake up to a good morning message. Everything felt safe and secure. No worries, just admiration. Story 3. She texted me, "Look at the moon." I was on my phone at the time, saw the banner notification, and immediately took a screenshot. I then asked myself why I did that. Story 4. When I found myself sharing my last slice of pizza without a second thought, that was when I knew it was real. Story 5. We were lying in his bed when I think someone closed the front door. It was loud and made me flinch. He almost immediately said, "You are okay," and pulled the blanket a little further up. There was something about him saying, "You are okay," instead of "It's okay," and saying it so quickly, I do not know. But that was the moment. Story 6. The first sign was that I couldn't stop looking at the shape of her face and the way her lips moved when she spoke. I remember thinking that her blonde hair was so beautiful it put the sun to shame. Even though someone had hurt me badly just a few months earlier, and I did not want to have feelings, I couldn't imagine being without her. It was a terrifying and beautiful moment. Story 7. I never thought people would be irreplaceable until I met my husband. Ours was a long distance, never going to happen in a million years type of relationship. When I realized that doing the easy thing and finding someone else who was more convenient crushed my heart, I understood he should be the man deserving of all the love I have in me. I love you, Pookie. I thank God every day for you. Story 8. I knew I loved him from the start when I first met him. He was so kind, funny, and cute. We met 5 or 6 years ago. I am finally with him. It has been 1 year and 2 months since we have been together. And I still love him the same. He still makes me nervous. His touches and everything about him make me feel even crazier in love. I have never felt this way about anyone before. Maybe I thought I did, but I did not. Being with him is so much different. I can be myself around him without any judgment. He makes me feel special. Story 9. When he researched what seizures are on YouTube so he would know what to do if I ever have a seizure in front of him. That is when I knew he was the one. Story 10. When I realized that I could not imagine going through this life without him in it. Story 11. I'm a pragmatist at heart, so I thought couples who fell in love at first sight and were still in love in their old age. I worked in aged care. We're just two hopeless romantics meeting and getting lucky when it turned out to be a lifelong thing. And then I met my husband. I knew who he was, the core of who he was, from the very first split second I saw him. All the baggage and life experiences that dictated behavior I figured were just semantics I would learn with time. But I knew him. I was right. It has been 8 years, and we have 3 kids, and I am still completely in love with him. The moment that completely sealed it for me happened about 3 weeks in. We had met and started living together the day after through a series of unplanned sleepovers where we stayed up too late talking. One day we went to the store. He was paying for things, and I realized I wasn't uncomfortable because I was going to marry him. Not in a giddy, I can't wait way, but in a calm, we literally have the rest of our lives to get to it, no rush kind of way. For his part, he claims he knew in the first week. Story 12. We went to a steakhouse for dinner, had a bit too much food and drink. We asked the server to box up dessert, took an Uber home and passed out. After intimate time in the morning, we remembered the dessert, so I grabbed it from the fridge and plated it up. White raspberry truffle cheesecake with raspberry sauce. We sat in bed, giggling and eating cake. When we were done, I noticed her casting a furtive glance at the plate and occasionally looking at me from the corner of her eyes. Me, "Damn, that was good." Her, "Aha." Me, "Wish I had more." Her, "Aha." Her, glance. Me, "You want to lick the plate, right?" Her, "No." "Well, actually, yes." Me, "Go for it. I'll hold your hair back." Her laugh and the light in her eyes were too much for me. I was smitten, would never want her to do this with anyone else, and knew I would be putting a ring on it eventually. We have been married 21 years now. We are not big on formalities, but every few years we track down a slice of that cake and have it on the morning of our anniversary. Story 13. I realized I was truly in love when we were sitting together in silence, doing nothing particularly special. We were just on the couch, both caught up in our own little worlds. She was reading, and I was scrolling through my phone, but there was an overwhelming sense of peace and contentment that washed over me. I didn't need her to say or do anything to make the moment perfect. It just was. It hit me then how deeply I cared for her and how much her presence alone made everything better. That was the moment I knew I was in love. Story 14. I would rather compromise or hear more about his opinion than only prove that I am right. He brings out the best in me, and I want to be that person for him. Story 15. It was the day they released our bar examination results. Passing was the ultimate goal of 3 brutal years of schooling and meant the difference between finally being able to work as a licensed attorney versus months of more grueling study to retake. When I saw that I passed, I barely felt any relief and realized it was more important to me to know that she passed. Story 16. The day they had to leave town, I was very depressed. Story 17. When I saw his baby pictures during my visit to his parents' house, something about those photos of him growing up made me realize how much I loved him and everything about him. Story 18. I remember her unique features. Her eyebrows, hands, the shoes she was wearing, the color of her dress, her hairstyle, her likes and dislikes, the way she talked, smiled, and her mistakes. I remember every bit of it. Unfortunately, she was my summer. Story 19. He got very drunk while we were camping on a float trip. I spent all night hearing him drink water, then lean over me to vomit out of the tent opening. Meanwhile, his butt was inside the tent passing gas repeatedly all night long. That night I realized, wow, I'm not even annoyed. I just love this crazy person. Story 20. I do not celebrate my birthday. She did celebrate my birthday. That is when I knew. Story 21. Throughout high school, I was very dorky about my crushes. Never had a girlfriend, nor had I ever had a kiss. During my first week of college, I decided to stop searching for love and just try to be casual and hook up without getting invested. I was taking an art class for fun and noticed a girl who I found pretty attractive, an international student from Indonesia. We went out on a few dates, my first ever, and I realized I didn't have it in me to hit it and quit it. She hadn't even had her first kiss either, and I started to realize that I actually liked this girl a lot. On the last day of the quarter, we were walking through a pasture near campus when I asked her if she'd be my girlfriend, and she said yes. When I dropped her off at her apartment, I left to buy a notebook and ended up getting a leather-bound journal. It hit me. I could not go another second without knowing what it was like to kiss her. I drove back, called her, and she came out. She knew what I was there for. We shared our first ever kiss, and I felt my already melting heart completely liquefy in warmth. We had a rough relationship over the next 2 years due to cultural and family problems, all of which I could see were stealing her youth from her. One day, when she broke up with me, I begged to work through it for a couple of days until she broke down crying and asked me to just accept it. I realized I was doing this to her, so I immediately agreed to go our separate ways. It was 8 years ago, and despite many relationships since then, I still remember her every time I look at the night sky. We came into contact a couple of years ago and spoke. She was engaged and married now, happily. I wish her all the best. I don't know if you can still love someone you haven't really known in almost a decade. They're hardly the same person anymore, most likely, but the love that was has forever changed the inner workings of my heart. Every night when I try to sleep, I remember the feel of her arms around my neck and her quiet voice against the sounds of a San Francisco night. Don't ever leave me, and part of me never will. Story 22. When I genuinely missed them after being apart for a couple of weeks and couldn't wait to see them, I felt it was truly reciprocated. I have never felt like that with anyone else. Story 23. She was plucking my eyebrows. I stared straight into her eyes and thought to myself, I really do love her. Story 24. It hit me when I could not wait to share every little detail of my day with them, knowing they would listen and care about the smallest things. Story 25. I was having a really bad panic attack after an incident, and my boyfriend called me on the phone to calm me down. I felt truly loved and protected in that moment, and it struck me that he actually cares for me. I want to make him feel just as loved. He also engages in activities I enjoy without hesitation. He tries out books and movies and then discusses them in depth with me. He goes to concerts with me, even though he has never heard of the artist before. He made it clear that he just wants to see me happy. Story 26. When I caught myself saving the last slice of pizza for them without even thinking about it. That is real love right there. Story 27. It sounds strange, but when we got sick on vacation, I rubbed his back while he vomited and cleaned it up. It was time to go into crisis mode and ride it out, but I did not feel disgusted. I just felt overwhelming care and concern. Love overrides disgust. Story 28. The instant I realized I would never get to talk to her again. No, she is not dead. She is alive, and I hope she is living her best life. After 10 years of nearly daily interaction, she decided that her happiness did not include me being a part of her life anymore. Ellie, wherever you are, I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope you find someone who will treat you right. Story 29. When he really angered me, I still had no intention of leaving. Story 30. I had the first inkling the first time we met and went in for a greeting hug. The smell, aura, and vibe of those few seconds made me feel like candy floss. But I think I really knew a few days later when we were just lying around listening to music and not talking. I had the sudden urge to share a very personal secret with him. I looked over at him and opened my mouth to speak but bottled it. Looked away, closed my eyes, and fought tears for a few seconds. When I looked back at him, he reached out and touched my face with a look that was a mixture of understanding, compassion, and protectiveness all rolled into one. There was just this feeling of deep connection, peace, and comfort that melted me. Story 31. When my heart did the spark thing, I know for sure that I will never feel it again. Story 32. We looked into each other's eyes and both said, I do not want to scare you, but I am falling in love with you. That was 43 years ago. We have been married for 41 years now. Story 33. When I was at the airport to drop her off, I was waiting as she disappeared into the crowd. She turned back for one last glimpse. The moment we made eye contact, I knew I would marry her. Story 34. When I gave almost all of my savings to help him pay the tuition for his younger brother, he was the breadwinner of their family. Story 35. When I realized that every single one of my thoughts about the future included her. Story 36. When I realized I would drink from the same cup and straw. Story 37. I'm an emotional guy, but when my dog died on the other side of the country, I completely lost it. I came home from work and, not wanting to bother my wife, I went into our spare bedroom and started bawling. She heard me and called my mom to figure out why I was in such a bad mood. When she found out, she brought me some water and grilled cheese. She sat beside me and let me know that she wasn't judging me and that she knew he meant a lot to me. Once I got myself together, she said, you know you don't have to go through this alone. I've got your back when things get rough. By that time, we had been together for about 2 years. I proposed to her a few months later. Story 38. When I first met her, she was extremely average looking, someone I would never look at twice, someone people would forget as soon as she left their line of sight. But the more time I spent with her, the more I found her beautiful. It was in the middle of the night when I realized, forget, I fell in love with her. To this day, she is still the person I consider the most beautiful in the world. Story 39. I have a rare syndrome that affects my eyes. My left eye lacks a nerve, so I cannot move it certain ways, and it looks unusual. I have always felt insecure and been bullied because of it. The first time we met, I noticed him looking at my eye as we spoke, and I felt bad because it always happens. When I turned my face, he said something like, I think you have really pretty eyes. It sounds simple to most, but it made me feel safe for the first time in years. Almost 1.5 years later, he still says things like that when I feel insecure and defends me when someone laughs about it. I love him with all my soul. Story 40. The day I looked in the mirror and saw the light in my eyes, I knew right then I was the one for me. Story 41. I felt like I had known her for years when we started dating, as if she had been my longtime friend for half of my life. I felt safe and at home from the first time I walked up the stairs to her apartment and saw her with a big smile on her face. She greeted me enthusiastically with a simple, "Hi." Story 42. Long story short, my girlfriend, now wife since June 1st of this year, was introduced to me by friends she met in China. We started in a long-distance relationship, but it was not exclusive because I was with my ex when I met her, and she was living her best life in another city in France while I was working in Paris. I realized I was truly in love when, after I introduced her to my parents 2 months into the relationship, she and my mom started hanging out alone. She was invited to my house without me, and after only 4 invitations to my parents' house, my girlfriend stated that my mom told her if she and I ever got married, she would be honored to consider her as her own daughter. At that exact moment, I felt deeply moved because my girlfriend was shocked and just thanked my mom. For context, my parents raised me against marriage and also taught me not to marry any Asian women. I was basically programmed to bring a Western girlfriend into the family. My mom is from Hong Kong, my father from mainland China, and my wife is from mainland China. So, for her to say those words naturally means something because you cannot fool her or my dad. They see through people and their intentions. Story 43. I was there with him when he was facing life problems and also when we were sleeping. If he did not snore, I would touch him or rub his chest. Then he would snore again. If he did not snore or breathe, although I was in the deepest sleep of my life, I would fully wake up and rub his chest. Story 44. When the honeymoon phase faded, I realized he did have flaws, and some of them were absurdly annoying, but I still wanted him around forever and did not wish to change or fix anything about him. Every day it still feels like a superior force flew me to the other side of the world just so I could enjoy his contagious laugh and smile and scoff at his loud sneezes. Story 45. I met this girl when I was 12. I had a little crush on her, but I had a crush on every woman. Even then, though, it felt different. We were both pretty mentally unwell, but it didn't matter to me. The more we talked, the more I thought I would be a happier person if I was with her. The moment I knew was about 5 months after talking to her. She went to a mental health center for a week. The first day was crushing. It felt like something I cared about deeply was being taken, and I couldn't do anything. Obviously, it was best for her to go, but that is the closest feeling I can describe. I had texted her daily, saying how much I missed her, how I hoped she was okay, and everything I was doing in my day-to-day life. It still wasn't until about 3 months after that we started dating because she didn't think I liked her and I didn't think she liked me. We have been together for the last 6 years, and I couldn't be happier. Of course, I look back and wonder just how oblivious I was. She dropped so many hints, and I just wasn't gathering what she was saying. Story 46. I have very serious, although valid, trust issues. I accepted that I couldn't be in a relationship because I am very unreasonable and jump to conclusions, but I am too afraid to share my worries for fear of retribution. My current girlfriend and I have been together for 5 years, and I am saving up for a ring. The first year was very challenging for us because I always assumed she was lying to me. At some point, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "We are on the same team." For some reason, I believed her and let my guard down. It was the best decision I have ever made, and I am very grateful she persisted through my issues. No one deserves to be with someone who does not trust them for essentially no good reason. Story 47. When I found myself thinking about my future, he was in it, but not in a romantic sense. More like at an academic life planning level. Like, yes, we're in it for the long haul and that's just how it is. The first time we bickered about something minor, and the first time we had a calm sit-down chat about why it hurt. Only those you love can hurt you with a splinter, and only those who love you back will have a real talk about it. I remember we said that most couples argue about the same things repeatedly, and neither of us wanted to do that. When I found myself pushing to be a better person. Story 48. When I started to notice all of the unattractive things she did, they did not bother me and made me love her even more. She could be in bed with an eye mask on, earplugs in, snoring loudly, and I would look over at her and think she is the most beautiful person in the world, inside and out. Story 49. For me, it was not some grand gesture or dramatic movie moment. It was the most mundane thing imaginable. We were sitting on the couch one Saturday morning, both in our most unattractive states. Messy hair, pajamas, and crumbs everywhere from whatever we were snacking on. She looked over at me and said, "Hey, you have something in your teeth." Without thinking, I grinned wider and said, "Get it for me?" Without missing a beat, she did. That is when it hit me. I did not feel embarrassed. I did not care about how I looked. I was totally comfortable with her in a way I had not been with anyone else. Love, I realized, is not just about grand romantic gestures or heart-pounding moments. It is about being fully yourself with someone who accepts you at your most awkward and ridiculous. It is that deep comfort where you are not afraid to be seen as imperfect because they love those imperfections. It is when they know your quirks, like how you forget important dates but somehow remember obscure movie quotes and still choose to stick around. Story 50. When I only wanted to hang out with her, I was slightly more on the reclusive side. Some might consider me an extroverted introvert. I can be social, but it drains my energy. When I find myself wanting nothing more than to be around someone, I know there is something special going on. Conversations flow easily. She made me want to leave the house and do things. It made me so happy to be anywhere in the world with her by my side. My energy wouldn't drain at all with her around. I know I'm deeply in love when I am certain they feel the same way about me. There is no better feeling than having strong feelings for someone and having them reciprocated selflessly and without ill intentions. That feeling is gone now. I lost hope I will find that again, so I am going back to being a homebody. Where there was once a euphoric feeling of love, the sadness now feels amplified tenfold when that person tells you they don't love you anymore. Story 51. It was on a date with a girl I met right here on Reddit. That same girl is now my wife. We walked on the beach holding hands and talked about our jobs. Then we sat down and watched the sunset. I slowly moved my hand across her face gently and said, "I don't like sand. It is coarse, rough, irritating, and it gets everywhere. Not like your face. It is soft and smooth." I began to slowly kiss her and then started to give rapid kisses all over her neck, cheeks, and lips. Her kisses tasted like candy. Story 52. When you find out she already has a boyfriend, you feel uncomfortable. Story 53. When she passed gas in her hand and threw it in my face. Story 54. I felt something when I first stepped off the train, saw her, and hugged her. In the following days, I just felt it, and I knew. I still get the same feelings, and I am still totally in love with her. I would literally walk off a cliff for her. Nobody has ever rocked my world like she has. Story 55. When I tried chocolate caramel cookies from a specific bakery that I had bought in a grocery store, they were the best I have ever eaten. Unfortunately, the supermarket terminated their contract with the bakery, and it is not reachable by public transport. Story 56. I was driving her to work and glanced over to see her looking at me deeply. Her eyes looked like a warm sunset. I was holding her hand, and everything felt calm and right. I never wanted that moment to end. We had been dating for a few months. She was the most patient, understanding, kind, clever, and beautiful girl I had ever met. I felt my heart swell so big that it turned into a lump in my throat. I had gotten out of a terrible relationship a year earlier and was still suffering from the repercussions. The way she listened always made me feel comfortable. I had never felt so safe confiding in somebody. She reassures me with a gentle touch and instinctively knows exactly what I need. I fall more in love with her every day. Story 57. When he was up front, there were no mind games. I wanted to spend every minute with him but didn't want to come off as clingy. He would ask, "Want to do this again next weekend?" And I would bashfully respond, "Well, only if you want to." He would reply, "I wouldn't ask if I didn't want to." I loved that. Another time was when we were in his car on the way back from breakfast together. He had music on and Long Shot by Catfish and the Bottlemen came on. I cannot understand why, but it made me realize I was in love with him. I secretly identified the song, and after he dropped me off at home, I listened to it on repeat. He still gives me those butterflies years later. Story 58. I knew I was in love when I couldn't stop thinking about him. Everything about him is enticing. No matter how upset I get or how hard life gets, I just want him at the end of the day. I initiated us being official because he was kind of timid, but I told him I wanted to give it a label because I honestly didn't want to get my feelings hurt. I knew I was madly in love with this man. We've been together ever since. I seriously couldn't imagine life without him, so I won't. He's everything I've ever wanted. Story 59. When the words, "I love you," are not enough. I can say it to pets, family, and friends, and it feels right, but saying it to him is not enough. It does not fully describe how I feel. I need a new word for it, but have not found one that fits yet. Story 60. The thought of her ever feeling alone or in any pain made me want to cry. Story 61. It was just after I was married, actually, in a bus shelter eating fish and chips in the rain. 30-odd years anniversary this week. Have fun and good luck out there. Story 62. I think my last relationship was the only time I have ever truly been in love, which is a terrible shame because it was absolutely unrequited. But I realized months after we broke up, it really does not matter what this person does. I still love him. I go through times when I would like to give him a swift kick, but that love is still there. I fantasized for weeks that he would realize the error of his ways and come knock on my door. I prepared my responses. Try Jesus, not me. Have you lost your mind? Because I will help you find it. Obviously has to be said in Stanley's voice. The more I thought about it, the more I knew I would just be so happy to see him. All I would be able to muster is, "Hi," before throwing my arms around him and crying. I was kidding myself. To be clear though, my love is unconditional. My presence is not. Story 63. I have moved a lot. Mom had many failed relationships. Food was scarce and insecure. Growing up, there was a lot of instability. Don't make friends. It will just be a new group in 4 months. Don't plan for the future. Who knows where you will be? Don't pay attention to the past. There are things there you do not want to think about. You get the idea. There was a point when I caught myself daydreaming about the future, which surprised me because I do not do that. But it got me thinking, why was I doing that? So I went down that rabbit hole and thought about the future. There was no future I could conceive of that did not include her. Story 64. Probably when I decided to play another game after losing and being verbally criticized for 20 minutes. Story 65. I always think about her, but now I have already forgotten her face. Still, I yearn to meet her every day. 3 days ago, I dreamed about her, but I could not see her face. It was empty. However, I could still see her smile. I want to at least see her again. Story 66. It was when I could finally rest and feel at peace with her sleeping on my shoulder. I did not want to grab my phone or do anything. I just wanted to exist there and do nothing. Story 67. When she was literally on the other side of the planet and got sad, somehow I just knew, so I phoned her. Story 68. She stood her ground. Like she is the type who would kick my ass. At that moment, I knew she is a keeper. That was 21 years ago. Story 69. When I accidentally said, "I love you," as she left. We were not even dating at the time, just very close friends. Thankfully, she did not hear me. She has known for years and wishes she did hear me say it because then she would not have had to wait so long for me. Story 70. Honestly, the first time we met, it was like coming home, catching up with the best friend you ever had. It was an overwhelming feeling of, oh, there you are. I have been looking for you my whole life, and it is still like that. He is my person, my other half, my soulmate. All things I absolutely categorically did not believe in until I walked into that date. Story 71. He told me he was afraid of the future because something was changing in his life, and he did not know what was next. I asked him what he wanted to be next, thinking it was something related to his job and passion. He said, "This, I think I want this with you." Story 72. Sorry if it sounds shallow, but she wanted sex much more than I expected. Story 73. I am in love with many things. It could be the perfect weather, the time of day, how my cat looks at me, or a certain connection with someone that is not necessarily romantic. I guess it is a sense of euphoria. I might be different because I am aromantic, so I understand why people interpret it romantically, but I have never related to that. Story 74. So I might have been experiencing food poisoning that day or something, but I genuinely saw everything more colorful the day after I told her, and it honestly stayed for a long time. It's back to being monotone colors, but that might just be Scotland. It has been 19 days since we have seen the sun. Story 75. When my girlfriend patted me on the back and said you are in love. Story 76. When I was riding in the canyon, mid-lean, I asked myself, would you give this up for her if she asked you to? The answer was yes. Story 77. Me, gun enthusiast. Her, just fine with that, considering I was hired as her bodyguard and research assistant on an election monitoring project in 2012. Me, Aspie, not exactly alpha male. Her, literally my boss, laugh out loud. Me, thrown out of the California chapter of the National Rifle Association for exposing Republican sheriffs selling gun permits under the table for large sums of money. Her, angered the entire Alabama Republican Party by exposing a plot to frame Democratic politicians for crimes they did not commit on the television program 60 Minutes. Hence the bodyguard part. They had tried to kill her a couple of times by then. As of November 2013, my last name became Simpson. Story 78. When I want to cook for him, take care of him, and support him in his and our goals, I know this sounds surreal, but just seeing him relaxes me. Story 79. I truly felt comfortable with him. I felt at peace and could be myself around him. Story 80. For me, the moment I did not care what anyone else thought, I knew I had reached a level of commitment and attachment beyond mere like and infatuation. Story 81. Sounds cliche, but it was love at first sight. We both froze, just staring at each other for a moment, and knew that we were soulmates. We never fight, have great communication, always know what the other needs, and are still in our honeymoon phase. We just celebrated 5 years of marriage and 10 years together. Story 82. When thinking about them or speaking to them felt like home. Story 83. I realized after dating my girlfriend for about 3 months that I had lost my concept of all time. She had become my way to tell time. The last time I saw my girlfriend and the next time I will see my girlfriend is the only way I tell time now. Story 84. I was blind. I was with him despite everything. I thought I could not live without him. Story 85. When I heard her voice in Bless Be, then Perennial, I melted when she sang certain parts in her songs, like Green Eyes and Secret Garden. Story 86. When their happiness became something I wished to observe more often than not. Story 87. When I see and hear them truly laugh, those moments when we can say or do the most random things without fear of being judged, feeling free to do whatever we want, it makes me happy and I wouldn't want anyone else. Even when things are rough, we still choose each other and strive to better ourselves for one another. Being able to enjoy them just being themselves and choosing each other while improving ourselves made me realize I was truly in love. Story 88. The phone rang, and my knees started knocking while my heart began beating faster. I knew this was different. Story 89. About a week before, she suddenly ended our relationship without explanation after 5 years together. I mistakenly believed she was the one. Story 90. When I realized that I was always happy around them, appreciated her company, loved being with her, talking with her, laughing with her, and being with her when she cried, I knew that I trusted her and always wanted to be around her. It was too bad that I realized this when she was already taken and out of reach. Story 91. I had received good news at work, and she was the first person I wanted to tell. The phone was in my hand when I realized, oh no, I'm in love. Story 92. When I came home from work, he was still there after a hookup, with some handmade wonton in freshly made dashi. I asked, do you want to stay? He is still here after 6 years. Story 93. I found things that would normally be cringe, embarrassing, or just not funny to be captivating, and she would make me smile no matter what she did. Story 94. When I didn't have to think twice about trusting he would not ghost me randomly. When I realized 100% of the time he crossed my mind, I smiled. When I realized he was actually making efforts to see me often and talk to me, and when he held me tighter while cuddling if I tried to get up. Story 95. Usher said, "You got it bad when you're out with someone, but you keep thinking about somebody else." When I would go out with friends or play basketball with friends, things that usually required some mental focus, I realized I was behind a play or something because I was thinking about him, what he might be doing, what he might be thinking, and how I wished he was there watching me play. I knew I loved him. I truly loved him when I would pay for things for him just because he wanted them or to make going somewhere with him financially possible. Even though I lost my job in January, I truly loved him when I sacrificed sleep to stay up one-time password with him so he wouldn't be lonely while he was doing whatever he had to do late at night. I truly loved him when I put my feelings on hold so he had someone to open up to. I truly loved him when I put him first in every situation, no matter what. I truly loved him when my heart shattered because we couldn't be together. And when I still think about him, care about him, want to be with him, and would give my life for him 6 months later. Story 96. When I am excited to go home just to see him, spend quality time together, and enjoy the small things in life. Story 97. When I told him how much work it would be to be in a relationship with me, he said something along the lines of, "I'm not a smart man," but still seemed resigned to try anyway. Story 98. When we got together after letting go for 12 years, he said he still loves me. He is now happily married to her. Story 99. I wanted to do the adventurous activities, all of them, and did not mind talking about it. Story 100. He was talking about what he wanted in a partner and said that he wanted someone to laugh with. I subconsciously thought, I want to be that person. Story 101. During the most difficult moments, when he smiled, it made me happier than ever. When he would touch my waist as he passed by, and I felt butterflies. When he would hold my hands, and they felt like home. When he gave me his ring because I forgot mine, and I didn't want to take it off anymore. When I could just speak my mind and talk to him about anything and everything, and started crying in his bed for him to sit beside me and listen. When we had a makeout session, and he didn't want to go any further because I hesitated when answering. When I was drunk on Christmas evening and still ended up walking with him, even though we were just friends, wanting nothing more than for him to kiss me. But the worst moment of all, when he broke my heart twice, and I still love him. Story 102. When he told me his mother was not okay, he sent me an audio message and I started crying because he was suffering. Story 103. When we first met, I kept smiling like an idiot for days. Story 104. When I started listening to all the songs that he liked, I loved every single one of them because they reminded me of him. I cried out of joy when he told me a sweet thing. I am usually not an emotional person. I began to feel the need to hear his voice at random moments of the day. Story 105. I found that you never really know when love begins because it is just a natural progression in a healthy relationship, but you always know when it ends. Story 106. When she handed me a letter explaining that it was over. Story 107. When he looked strangely glowing and perfect, I had the urge to tell every woman I saw that he was mine and with me, not them. The realization fully hit me when I understood poetry and love songs. Story 108. I couldn't stop thinking about him. I cried at the thought that he might not feel the same. I wanted to be with him all the time. He has always made me feel safe and at home. Those are the things I need to be comfortable anywhere, and he is that for me. Story 109. Damn fear literate plucky faulty disarm shy marble silky support. Story 110. I was visiting my partner in his city. We had been in a long-distance relationship for a short time. As the train I was on pulled away from him, I told myself that the next time I came, I would not leave. I would never feel the ache of putting 700 miles between us again. And I did not. When I made it home, he called, and the first thing he said was, "Next time you should stay." I knew I was deeply in love with him. Story 111. Story time. I was in the middle of a love triangle between my best friend and my new friend, both of whom were my exes. I had known my best friend for a couple of years, and we were on and off most of the time. She was the cute, sexy party girl, but our personalities were perfect for best friends because we were exactly alike. The problem was that, in a relationship, we were pretty toxic for each other. During a recent breakup, I met someone who was the opposite. Not the makeup, dressy party girl, but still cute and very sweet. She was always genuine and happy to be around me, which made me happy. I dated her for 6 months and slowly realized she was in love with me, but I did not feel the same way. I decided to break it off. So I would not lead her on like I had with my ex for a long time. I spoke to her at her house very respectfully and ended it. She walked me to the bus and cried when it drove away. I cried on the bus like a baby, but it was too late. I decided I would not contact her at all unless I was certain that this was what I wanted. Later, my best friend and I decided to give it another try. We were okay for a month, but something was off. I did not feel the same way about her. I could tell she was getting distant as well. One night, lying in bed, I had an epiphany. Suddenly, it was all so clear. Loved my new friend more than I had ever loved anyone before. I called my best friend and told her I thought we should stop this dance and move on. Maybe later we could try to be just friends again. She agreed, so I called my new friend. I told her I would like to meet and talk. She agreed, so I drove over and waited with flowers like a dork. When I saw her walking toward me, my heart skipped a beat, and I was super nervous. I gave her the flowers and told her everything about my best friend, about my feelings going back and forth, about why I felt the breakup was necessary, and finally how I love her and had learned the difference between love and infatuation. She punched me hard on the cheek, started crying, and jumped into my arms. I took her home, and we have been together since. Married with kids. Story 112. When I realized he listened to me, really listened to me in a way no other person ever had. Story 113. I felt safe around her. I constantly thought about her. I had that fire in my chest every time I was around her or thought about her. Then she cheated on me, and when I confronted her, she told me to kill myself. She was the first woman I had loved in 10 years. Story 114. When I realized I could not imagine the rest of my life without him in it. Story 115. She lost her mind within the first 5 seconds of watching Team America. Story 116. No idea. But the very first time I met him, my knees just melted. Story 117. When we went on our first date, I forgot about all my depression and actually had a good time for the first time in forever. Story 118. When I wasn't too concerned about my financial well-being, I could help and support her a little. I know it's not enough to keep her, though. Story 119. I had a visit from a former college female friend who I had a crush on in college. She was passing through, which meant a Saturday away from my girlfriend. She made a pass at me that night. This woman has supermodel looks and is quite intelligent. I said, "No, you turned me down in college, so now it is time for you to leave because I am going to my girlfriend's place." My girlfriend and I were not even dating exclusively yet. Maybe 2 months in. I couldn't stop thinking of her the whole time my ex-crush was with me. Story 120. Ah man, I wish I knew the moment because then there would be one. But there were like a bunch in a row. Everything was perfect. Maybe when we saw Valentine's Day together. She wanted to see it and I didn't. I went without telling her and like 10 minutes in I was like, wait, she actually wants me to be the guy to see this with her. That was like 3 months in. To be honest, the song Big Yellow Taxi is the epitome of that relationship. But I would say maybe the 10th dinner date we had where we ordered Capri's as an appetizer. Maybe 19 months in. Having a "we should order this every time" on the second Italian restaurant we had dinner at and actually following through to 10 dinner dates. I remember that dinner very well. I think we made it to 13 dinners where we ordered Capri's when it was available. Story 121. When you enter a space where the person is, they look at you, and suddenly you have to try very hard not to have the biggest smile ever. At least that is how I knew, and everyone around also noticed it. Story 122. When they have to go home, but you do not want them to, you start feeling a heaviness in your heart. Story 123. When I shifted into second gear, the tires let out a loud chirp. Story 124. Talked to her for hours and it felt like minutes. It was the first time we reconnected in almost a year, and it felt like I never stopped speaking with her. Everything made sense and flowed perfectly. Story 125. The day I brought her home. I also realized that if true love felt like I felt for this girl, then I had never truly been in love before. Story 126. When I realized I genuinely cared more about her than what she had to offer me. We never dated, and she ended up with someone else, so it faded away. I don't think we've spoken for a decade or so now, but last I checked, she got married fairly recently. I had the same realization with a friend I had a couple of years back, but not romantically. We fell out of contact because our schedules got too busy after I started my current job, and we live in different time zones. I am in Australia, and she is in Mexico. I seem to have a habit of losing people I love, but I am not bitter about it. I am not sure if it will happen again. I don't really care enough to socialize outside of work, and I work from home. Story 127. Hey, this might not come off as the most romantic thing, but here it goes. In my 69 years, I've never felt love the way people describe it in comments or in stories. I regret that I'm just not capable of experiencing that kind of intense, passionate love. Feels like I've missed out on something truly magical. We've been married for 35 years, and somewhere in the first half, though I'm not sure exactly when, I began to really love her. I never had those big fireworks moments. No whirlwind romance or overwhelming feelings that knock you off your feet. But instead, what I have is something quieter and deeper. No fireworks, but a steady flame that brings me happiness and contentment. I do feel regret for missing out on that kind of magic, but I never want to lose what we have together. I'm grateful that we get to spend our retirement side by side, with my best friend and the love of my life, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Story 128. I asked her to forge some court documents for me, which kept me out of jail. She refused. I married her. Story 129. When he gave me the skin from his Kentucky Fried Chicken, it was the best part, and he gave it up for me. Story 130. As he filled up the gasoline tank, I went into the store to buy a drink. While I was picking one from the cooler, I felt him come up behind me. We walked to the counter and paid, and I realized he did not buy anything, so I asked him why he came inside. His answer was, "I just wanted to be near you." Story 131. After a few dates, she offered to pay for dinner and refused to let me touch my wallet. We both had similar salaries at the time. As difficult as it sounds, it shocked me that a woman displayed a desire for partnership and sharing. All my emotional walls came crumbling down, and my ability to finally love, and not just want to get laid for the price of dinner and a few drinks, opened up. She changed the dynamic and showed that she wanted me. That was over 30 years ago. Dating etiquette might be different now, and we are still together. Story 132. I was having a hard night, missing him and feeling anxious. At that time, we only saw each other maybe once every 2 weeks because of our conflicting work schedules. I remember thinking how I wanted to text him to come over and hold me, but I was scared of being disappointed if he said no. When I finally did, he obliged immediately and was lying in my bed soon after. This was not the big act that convinced me I was in love. This was the tipping point on a barely upright scale. We told each other, "I love you," for the first time by fingerspelling it on each other's backs that night, laughing about how much we were holding the words in. A few years later, we are madly, deeply, contagiously in love. Story 133. It was the day I had my driver's test. I was 24 and did it later in life for reasons. I had failed the other 3 tests I had tried before. I was nervous. He sent me a picture that morning of a really cool butterfly decoration. He knows I'm a big fan of all sorts of flying creatures and wished me good luck. The moment I passed, I texted him that it happened, and he said in all caps, "Yay, I knew you could do it. I'm so proud of you." And that was that. I decided right there and then that I loved this man to death and back. It started as a long-distance online relationship. We met in real life for the first time in August, and it was absolutely magical. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.